Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
For 30 years, I made gazpacho and helped build his business, and yet, at the anniversary party, he declared in front of all the guests, she's useless. She's been a burden on me all her life. At 50, she dared to do what others only whisper into their pillows for a lifetime. This is the story of a woman who, in her 6th decade, found her voice, her name, and her true self. Hello, friends. We're happy to welcome you to the channel. But before we continue, tell us which country you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Maria woke up a second before the alarm rang. The habit of rising precisely at 5 a.m. had become ingrained over the years, back when she had to prepare breakfast, get the kids ready for school, and review papers for Javier. The kids had long since grown up, but the routine remained. She gently turned off the alarm and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her husband. Javier slept sprawled out on his side of the bed, the deep sleep of a man confident in his own irreplaceability. In the bathroom, Maria studied her reflection for a long time. Fine lines fanned out from the corners of her eyes, a testament to thousands of smiles, both genuine and forced. She had stopped dyeing her gray hair 6 months ago, and now the silver strands beautifully accented her still thick chestnut locks. 50. How stealthily that number had crept up on her. Happy birthday, Maria, she whispered to her reflection, then smiled involuntarily. A memory suddenly floated to the surface. 30 years ago, the university courtyard, benches under the orange trees, and her, a straight-A student with a thick braid, clutching her notes. Across from her was Javier, casually strumming a guitar, his long, musical fingers, his smile that made half the faculty weak in the knees. "Hey, bookworm," he had called out. "Bet you don't know a single Paco de Lucia song." She hadn't taken offense. She laughed and recited the first verse of Entre dos Aguas by heart. The look of surprise on his face was worth secretly borrowing the cassette from her dorm mate. Maria shook her head, brushing the memory away. There was too much to do. By 7 a.m., tapas were already laid out on the kitchen table, marinated meat was resting, and the churros dough was rising in a warm corner. Her hands moved confidently, repeating the motions her mother once taught her: if you cook, put your soul into it, otherwise the food will be hollow. Her phone pinged. A message from Lucia lit up the screen. "Happy birthday, my dear. I know you're already up and cooking. But remember, today is your day. I love you. I'll be there at 6. Maria smiled, picturing her tireless friend, who must have woken up at the crack of dawn just to be the first to send congratulations. Lucia was the only person who had always seen more in her than just a wife and mother. "You buried your talent, Maria," she once said when she learned Maria had turned down a postgraduate program. Back then, 29 years ago, saying no had felt like the right decision. "Why do you need graduate school?" Javier had whispered passionately, kissing her neck. "I'll give you the whole world. Together we'll build a future you can't even imagine." The future. Maria gave a bitter smile as she stirred the tortilla batter. That word now felt so naive. "What, are you planning to feed the army?" Javier's voice, hoarse from sleep, made her flinch. He stood in the kitchen doorway, in pajama pants and a t-shirt, rumpled, with a pillow mark on his cheek. Once, this look had made her heart melt. Now, it only made her tired. "Good morning," Maria replied without turning. "You know we're expecting guests today." Speaking of which, Javier reached for the coffee machine. "I invited the Rodriguezes and the Hernandezes. We need to discuss the new shopping center." Maria froze, spoon in hand. "On my birthday?" Her voice was quiet, but steel rang in it. "You're turning my birthday into a business meeting? Come on." Javier waved it off, sipping his coffee. "Guests are coming anyway, what's the difference? You're just setting the table like always." Like always. He used to give her flowers on her birthday, not ones bought last minute by his assistant after a calendar reminder, but ones he chose himself. Once, he brought her a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the roadside. "They reminded me of you, modest, But if you look closely, the most beautiful. Now he hadn't even remembered today was special for her. I'm heading out now. I'll be back by 6, Javier said, finishing his coffee. And don't overdo it with the spices and the meat. Rodriguez doesn't like them. He left without waiting for a response. Maria stood there, flour on her fingers, bitterness in her heart. The phone chimed again. This time it was a video. The face of 5-year-old Mateo, her grandson, appeared on screen. Abuela. His bright voice filled the kitchen with warmth. Happy birthday. Look what I drew. The boy proudly showed a drawing, a bright orange sun and a woman with an oversized smile. That's you, he explained. The best grandma in the world. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. This was what made life worth living. The doorbell rang as she was finishing the table setting. Isabel stood on the threshold with Mateo, who ran into her arms with a delighted squeal. Mom. Maria hugged her daughter. I'm so happy to see you. Happy birthday. Isabel handed her an elegant box. It's from Mateo and me. Inside was a delicate silk scarf, the very one Maria had admired during their shopping trip a month earlier. Mateo, what do we say to Grandma? Isabel prompted him. Happy birthday. The boy handed over another drawing, this one with glitter. Look, I glued it all myself. While Mateo explored the toy box kept just for his visits, Isabel looked closely at her mother. You look tired, she noted. Did you cook everything yourself again? Dad could have ordered catering. I'm fine, Maria waved her off. Better tell me how work's going. You mentioned problems with the new project? Isabel sighed heavily and began telling her about the editor-in-chief rejecting her idea for a series of articles about female entrepreneurs. Can you believe it? She said. He said the topic was too niche. In 2023. Maria shook her head thoughtfully. You know, she said, try approaching it differently. Not as a series on women in business, but as a study of unconventional strategies in entrepreneurship. Show how these women found their niches, what sets them apart. Start with the biggest success stories, then move on to those just starting out. Isabel stared at her mother in surprise. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? She shook her head. Mom, with your mind, you could run a whole department. Sometimes I don't get why you always stay in the background when you have so much to offer. Maria said nothing, but something flickered across her face, a mix of sorrow and a long-buried dream. The day was only beginning, yet she already felt like she was at a crossroads, like something irreversible was shifting in her life. And this birthday wasn't just another milestone, it was a threshold between the past and a new, uncharted future. She smoothed invisible creases on her navy blue dress, found a month ago in a second-hand store. Real Spanish silk. Modest, but with character. The price was a joke, either the staff didn't know the brand or just needed it gone. It fit her perfectly, as if it had been tailored just for her. Hard to believe it's second-hand, she murmured, turning in front of the mirror. Javier would have had something to say about it, a businessman's wife wearing used clothes. But the days when Maria feared his judgment were over. She had long since mastered saving, paying for the kids' education, helping her parents, setting money aside for gifts for her grandchildren, from the funds her husband considered his. Her thoughts drifted back to the early 90s, when Javier still didn't separate his from hers. Back then, they were a team. Maria, this is a chance. Javier had once whispered fervently, gripping her hands. Wholesale trade is a goldmine, everyone says so. I've got the contacts, and you've got the economist's brain. They were sitting in the tiny kitchen of their rented apartment. Isabel, their firstborn, was asleep in her stroller nearby. Maria had just turned 23, her studies were finished, maternity leave was coming to an end, and she had to decide what to do next. But where would they get the startup capital? Maria shook her head, absent-mindedly adjusting the blanket over her daughter. We could take out a loan, Javier cautiously suggested. A chill ran through Maria's chest. It was a turbulent time, Banks were collapsing one after another, scammers were multiplying like mushrooms after rain, and interest rates looked more like phone numbers. Using my apartment as collateral, she said slowly, referring to the one-bedroom flat she had inherited from her grandmother. Javier's eyes lit up, though he quickly tried to hide it. I'm not insisting, darling. But this could be our chance to break through. A week later, Maria was signing papers at a bank where a former classmate now worked. She arranged a 70% annual interest rate for them, practically charity by the standards of the time. Their first warehouse was on the city outskirts, a grimy hangar with a leaky roof. Javier made the deals, brought in the goods, and Maria kept the records, talked to the first customers, and calculated the risks. When Diego was born, she often came to the warehouse with the infant, setting up a makeshift crib for him between boxes of merchandise. We can't keep selling under the radar forever, she said 6 months in, flipping through a worn-out notebook. We need a real store, with a sign, a cash register, the works. But that's a whole different kind of money, Javier objected. And besides, everyone opens shops in the city center. The rent there is insane. Maria shook her head. We won't open in the center. I've got a better idea. Her phone pulled her out of the memory, a message from her daughter. Mom, don't worry if Dad forgot to say happy birthday. Diego and I didn't. Maria smiled sadly. Her children understood everything, even the things she never said out loud. Still, her mind stubbornly drifted back to the past. The suburbs, that's where the real money is, she explained to Javier, spreading out a homemade city map on the table. People go to the center to work, but they live and shop in their own neighborhoods. Rent is 3 times cheaper, and for daily necessities, foot traffic is even higher. Javier was skeptical, but when the first suburban shop earned double the revenue of a nearby downtown kiosk within a month, he celebrated as if the idea had been his all along. By the late 90s, they had 5 stores. Maria was spinning like a hamster on a wheel: children, home, bookkeeping, negotiations with suppliers. For some reason, the suppliers preferred dealing with her over Javier. You're clear and straight to the point, an older wholesaler once told her while they sat in a smoke-filled office. But your husband promises too much, and his eyes are shifty. So let's stick with you. Maria pinned a simple silver clip, her son's birthday gift, to her hair. Her look was nearly complete. The only question left was, heels or comfy flats? After all, it was her birthday. When did everything change? She asked herself while eyeing the 2 pairs of shoes. The answer came instantly. I'm proud to present the author of our company's innovative growth strategy. Javier beamed at the staff during the company's 5-year anniversary. The idea to open stores in the suburbs instead of downtown has completely proven itself. Maria froze by the wall, not believing what she'd heard. That idea had been hers, something she'd laid out to him on countless sleepless nights, calculating every detail while he hesitated. Their eyes met, and for a second Javier faltered, but the applause gave him courage to continue. We've always tried to forge our own path. That evening, she truly got drunk for the first time in her life. Lucia gave her tea in her kitchen while Maria, through tears, whispered, "You know, it's not even about him stealing the idea. It's the ease with which he did it, as if it were his right." From that moment on, Maria learned to retreat into the background, to present her ideas in a way that made Javier believe they were his, to do all the dirty work and then admire his brilliant decisions. "You've done this to yourself," Lucia used to tell her, trying to get her out to some course, a play, or the gym. "You're not even in your own life anymore." But Maria only brushed her off. The business was growing, the kids needed attention, and somewhere in the middle of all that, she had lost herself. Even 10 years ago, on a business trip with Javier, when she accidentally picked up his phone instead of hers and saw a message from someone named Carmen, she didn't throw a fit. She read the messages, felt the ground vanish beneath her, and quietly put the phone back. Then she was sick for a week. A cold, she told everyone. In truth, she was paralyzed by grief and helplessness. Javier never found out that she knew. and Carmen soon vanished from their lives, likely just a fleeting affair. But something inside Maria froze for good that day. A knock on the door startled her. Guests? This early? She checked the clock. No, still 2 hours before anyone was supposed to arrive. Probably the courier with the cake. Her hand hovered over the doorknob as she remembered the conversation from a week ago, the one that had changed everything. They were having dinner when Maria mentioned buying their grandson a remote-controlled car. There you go again, wasting my money on useless gifts, Javier had snapped, pushing his plate away. You could have just gotten him candy. My money. 2 words. 30 years of marriage. A business they had built together from nothing. And now this, my money. Maria had said nothing then, but something inside her cracked, something final and irreversible, as if someone had finally spoken aloud the truth she had tried to deny for so long. To him, she was not an equal. She was an accessory, a convenient helper, a housemaid with bookkeeping skills. Is this really all I deserve after 30 years? She had asked herself. And now, standing in front of the mirror on her 50th birthday, she could finally answer truthfully. No. I deserve more. Maria slipped on her heels and walked to open the door. This day would not be just another birthday. This day would be the start of a new life, her own life. The doorbell rang precisely at 4. Javier's parents were always the first to arrive, with punctual Spanish exactitude. Maria straightened her shoulders and closed her eyes for a moment to gather strength. The smile she wore with her party dress tightened slightly. Consuelo stood at the door, regal as ever, like a monument, with her usual string of pearls around her neck, a relic from her days teaching literature at a prestigious school. Behind her shuffled Gustavo, carrying a box of chocolates and wearing a warm smile. Happy birthday, Marita. The old man hugged her awkwardly. He smelled of tobacco and aftershave. Consuelo lightly touched Maria's cheek with her dry lips. I hope we're not too early, she asked, eyeing the apartment. Oh, you wore blue. An interesting choice. Though, at your age, perhaps something less bold would have been more appropriate. Maria silently took her mother-in-law's coat. 30 years of such remarks had taught her not to react. But today, every word bounced off the invisible armor she had put on along with her decision to change her life. Come into the living room, I'll serve tea in a moment. Let me help you. Gustavo followed her into the kitchen, clumsily brushing against a vase of flowers on the way. His eyes carried an unspoken apology for his wife, a quiet, loyal solidarity that had existed between them from the very beginning. How are you, Marita? He asked softly once they were alone. Did Javier at least wish you a proper happy birthday? She said nothing, and that was enough. The old man sighed deeply, then pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. This is from me, just me. Don't tell Consuelo, she thinks the chocolates are enough. Inside were silver earrings with topaz, modest, but tasteful. Gustavo, you shouldn't have. Yes, I should, he said firmly, shaking his head. I see everything, even if I'm old. You've carried it all on your shoulders for so many years. Returning to the living room with a tea tray, Maria saw Consuelo examining a child's brooch Mateo had made, with a look of thinly veiled disgust. It was a clumsy creation of cardboard, glitter, and dried flowers. And he came up with this himself, her mother-in-law asked with open skepticism. An odd hobby for a boy. Javier was already taking radios apart at his age. Mateo is a very creative child, Maria replied calmly, taking the brooch and gently pinning it to her dress. And I'm proud that he knows how to see beauty in simple things. Something in her tone made Consuelo fall silent, perhaps the unexpected steel in the voice of her usually accommodating daughter-in-law. By 6 o'clock, the apartment buzzed with voices. Javier's business partners appeared at the door like products off an assembly line, identical suits, identical smiles, identical wives with lacquered hair and designer handbags. Maria greeted the guests with the automatic politeness of a seasoned hostess, while Javier oozed charm, hugging the men and kissing the ladies' hands. Not a single word about it being his wife's birthday, as if this were just another business dinner. "Oh, Maria, these tartlets are simply divine," trilled Blanca, Rodriguez's wife, in that tone reserved for the praise of second-class achievements. "You're a magician. I so wish I knew how to cook. Thank goodness for our Italian chef." Anna and Sophia nodded beside her. Maria always confused their names. They were so interchangeable. "Oh, Barcelona in May is just magical," one of them chimed, jangling her bracelets. "We stayed at that hotel on the coast. You remember the photos I showed you? 5 stars, private butler." Maria nodded and smiled, feeling invisible. In her own home, on her own birthday, she was nothing more than support staff, a piece of the furniture. "Let me refill your glasses." She glided professionally among the guests with a bottle of wine. Her mother had once told her, "Maria, no matter what happens, never lose your dignity. You may cry, but do it with your back straight." Those words echoed in her mind as she overheard fragments of Javier's conversation. "Yes, that was my idea. Turned out to be a profitable model. My wife? Oh, she handles the house stuff. The risk was mine, but I had a feel for the market. Each stolen credit, each lie burned like acid, but at the same time, it strengthened her, as if every word Javier spoke was another brick in the wall of her resolve." Lucia burst into the apartment like a whirlwind, instantly disturbing the stiff atmosphere of the gathering. "Sorry I'm late." She hugged Maria tightly, not caring if she wrinkled the dress. "Happy birthday, my dear." In her hands wasn't the usual box of chocolates, but an oddly shaped bundle wrapped in bright paper. "What is it?" Maria smiled, for the first time that evening, a real smile. "You'll see later," Lucia winked. "It's for the new you." Javier grimaced slightly at the sight of the new guest. He had never hidden his opinion that Lucia was a bad influence on his wife. A divorced nutcase, he called her during their fights. "Lucia," he nodded coolly. "Always the dramatic entrance." "Javier," she replied just as coolly, "always the gracious host, didn't even mention it's your wife's birthday." An awkward silence hung for a second before Maria took Lucia by the arm and led her to the kitchen under the pretext of slicing something. "What are you doing?" Maria hissed, glancing over her shoulder. "What did I say?" Lucia popped an olive in her mouth. "Just the truth, those peacocks in your house don't even know it's your birthday. What are they chirping about? Yachts and watches?" Maria lowered her head, running her fingers over the embroidery of a kitchen towel. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life," she said quietly. "Like I'm a supporting actress in a movie about Javier." Lucia took her by the shoulders and looked her in the eye. "Then in the damn movie, Maria. How much longer? You're beautiful, smart, strong. You held that business together while she nodded toward the living room. Was out wasting nights with his guitar. You raised amazing kids. You can still start over. At 50? Maria gave a bitter smile. "Maria." Lucia lowered her voice, spotting Javier's silhouette in the doorway. "Do you remember today is your 50th? That's not the end, it's the beginning." Before Maria could answer, the doorbell rang. "Were you expecting someone else?" Lucia asked, surprised. "No," Maria frowned. "The kids are here, and so are the rest." She opened the door and froze. There stood a tall man with silver at his temples, an elegant coat, and a bouquet of white peonies, her favorite flowers. "Antonio." Maria breathed, her cheeks flushing. Antonio Martinez, their university classmate, whom she hadn't seen in 15 years, gave a slightly sheepish smile. "Hello, Maria. Sorry to intrude. I heard from mutual friends that today's your birthday, and I thought I'd drop by and say congratulations." "Who is it, darling?" Javier's voice came from just behind her, and Maria felt his hand possessively settle on her shoulder. "Oh, look who it is, Fernando. I mean Antonio," Javier said, overplaying his surprise. "Long time, no see." Antonio extended his hand, which Javier shook with exaggerated enthusiasm. But Maria noticed the way his jaw tensed. Maybe he remembered their student days and the quiet rivalry for her attention. Come in, come in. Javier practically dragged him inside, not even letting Antonio hand the bouquet to Maria. What brings you to our neighborhood? You were based in Barcelona, right? Antonio nodded, gently freeing himself from Javier's grip. Yes, I lived there for 15 years. But I recently moved back, developing an eco-business here now. Finally, he turned to Maria and held out the bouquet. Happy birthday, Maria. There was so much warmth in his eyes that something stirred inside her. You haven't changed at all. Maria took the flowers, inhaling the long-forgotten scent. White peonies. How did he know? Had he remembered that distant spring when she had casually mentioned they were her favorite? Back at graduation, Antonio had disappeared for half an hour and returned with an armful of peonies for her. She still remembered how that tall boy had blushed as he handed them over, and how his face fell when he saw her standing next to Javier. Thank you, she smiled, her voice softer than she expected. I'm really glad to see you. Something shifted in Javier's expression when he saw the exchange of looks, something like a blend of surprise and jealousy. Well, come join us, he said, clapping Antonio too hard on the back. Let's drink to old friends reuniting. Maria walked to the kitchen to place the peonies in a vase. Her fingers trembled slightly as she trimmed the stems. It's just a surprise visit, she told herself, but her heart beat faster and her lips curved into a smile. For the first time in years, her birthday didn't feel like a hollow ritual. This day truly felt like the beginning of something new. The dining set, bought in the early 2000s to mark their first major business success, now felt foreign to Maria. The polished table surface reflected the crystal and porcelain she had carefully arranged, like a display in a luxury shop. 13 people sat around the table, and the air grew thick with perfume and tension. Maria sat last, between Gustavo and Lucia. A small tactical victory in an invisible war. Opposite her sat Javier and Antonio, and the seating gave the whole scene the air of a duel. The clink of a fork against a glass silenced the room. Javier stood, raising his glass to eye level, a gesture honed at countless corporate events. Dear friends, he began with a wide smile. It's a pleasure to see you all. Tonight is especially nice because so many of you are not only business partners, but close friends of our family. Maria noticed Lucia rolling her eyes, no mention of the birthday, just as expected. Today is a meaningful day, Javier continued, and something in his tone made Maria wary. Exactly 20 years ago, we opened our first major store, the beginning of an empire, so to speak. A wave of approving murmurs spread through the room. Maria raised her glass mechanically, feeling her fingertips go numb. The date was wrong. They had opened that store a year earlier. Javier knew it, but evidently, the truth didn't fit his narrative. Over the years, I've built a network that became a market leader, he said now, using only the first person. It wasn't always easy, there were challenges and doubts, but I always believed in what I was doing. And in the people beside you, I hope? Antonio's voice was calm but carried a quiet challenge. To the wonderful hostess, Maria Lopez. Happy birthday, and to her unwavering support of your business all these years. An awkward pause. The guests exchanged looks, only now realizing they were at a birthday. Of course, of course. Javier laughed, but the laughter sounded hollow. Maria has always been a reliable support, a homemaker, a mother, a wife. And a talented analyst, as I recall, Antonio added gently. Back in university, everyone expected her to have a brilliant career. Maria froze. No one had spoken about her like that in years, as someone with her own talents and ambitions. In Antonio's eyes, she saw the same respect she remembered from their university days, when they used to argue passionately in seminars over economic development models. Ah, academic achievements, Javier waved dismissively. Life is a bit more complicated than textbook exercises. Actually, Rodriguez unexpectedly joined the conversation. In life, what matters even more is the ability to analyze data and identify trends. I recently read an interesting study on women executives. Companies with gender-balanced leadership teams report 15% higher financial performance. Javier visibly tensed. The discussion on business values was veering into a direction he didn't like. "Come on," he tried to joke. "Next you'll be saying my Maria could run a corporation." "And why not?" Antonio looked straight at Maria, and his gaze made her breath catch. The appetizers gave way to the main course, and conversation drifted into the usual dinner party territory: politics, exchange rates, real estate. Maria automatically poured wine, changed plates, smiled at jokes, but something had shifted in the air, a kind of unseen current, a charged tension in the room. Javier, flushed with wine and clearly irritated by Antonio's presence, launched into a loud account of a new contract with a supermarket chain. "Can you believe it? At first they wouldn't even talk to us, but I convinced them. Gave them a killer presentation, blew them away. And now the deal's sealed, we start deliveries on June 1st. Maria froze, her spoon suspended halfway to her mouth. That contract had been her work. 3 months of negotiations, dozens of meetings, meticulous document prep. Javier had only shown up for the final meeting, to sign the papers. Now that's interesting. Hernandez, director of a logistics firm, perked up. They're infamous for brutal supplier terms. How'd you manage that? I found the right approach, Javier winked. Business instincts. Persuasion skills. Maria lowered her eyes. She knew better than to expect credit. It had always been like this. Actually, it was Maria Lopez who convinced us to sign those early documents, said Mendez, the supermarket rep, who had been quiet until now. I remember her coming in with those calculations, the market research analysis. Very impressive work. Silence. Javier's fork froze midair. Maria felt her cheeks flush. In all these years, she had never once received public acknowledgement for her work, until now, and from someone who didn't even realize the grenade he just tossed into the family mythology. Maria sometimes helps with the little things, Javier said tightly, forcing a smile. You know, a woman's touch can be useful in details, but strategy and negotiation, that's serious business. That's my field. Mendez blinked in confusion. But Maria Lopez prepared the presentation and all the financial models. Didn't she? We even wondered back then why she wasn't listed as a company co-owner. Javier's face darkened. Maria saw the vein bulging at his temple, always a sign of an impending explosion. I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility, she said gently, trying to diffuse the situation. I prefer to stay in the background. Modesty becomes a woman, Consuelo interjected unexpectedly. Though modern women seem to have forgotten that. Lucia straightened abruptly, clearly ready to leap into battle, but Maria touched her hand under the table. Not now. The room grew unbearably heavy with silence. By the time dessert was served, Javier, now thoroughly drunk, was laughing loudly at his own jokes. His hand lingered too long on Sophia's chair back, longer than decency allowed. Maria watched it all as if from a distance, like an observer in a theater of the absurd. Speaking of women in business, Javier suddenly said loudly, and something in his tone made everyone tense. Maria, a businesswoman? Don't make me laugh. She's only good for making gazpacho and shuffling papers. She's been living off me her whole life. Honestly, I should have kicked her out long ago. The words landed like a slap. Awkward silence fell over the table. The women stared into their plates. The men pretended they hadn't heard. Gustavo cleared his throat but didn't have the strength to contradict his son. Maria stood frozen, a porcelain dessert dish in her hands. 30 years of humiliation. 30 years of quiet acceptance. And this, public shaming on her birthday, in her own home, at a table she had set with her own hands. Javier, that's not fair, Antonio's calm voice cut through the silence like thunder. Maria has always been a brilliant analyst. Her papers were exemplary at university. And if you had valued her talent instead of suppressing it all these years, who knows how far you both might have come. What the hell do you know? Javier exploded, slamming his fist on the table. The glasses rattled. You've been holed up in Barcelona for 15 years, and now you're going to lecture me on how to live with my wife? I'm not lecturing you on marriage, Antonio replied evenly. I'm reminding you to respect a colleague professionally. Maria is essentially your business partner. Isn't she? Javier laughed loudly, forced, jagged. Partner? Her? She's useless. She's been a burden all my life. I would have kicked her out ages ago if not for. The sound of shattering glass made everyone jump. The dish with the birthday cake had cracked in Maria's hands. Like in slow motion, it slipped from her suddenly weak fingers and crashed to the floor. Porcelain shards mixed with cream and berries, a vivid stain on the restrained interior. A heavy silence filled the room. All eyes turned to Maria, standing motionless over the broken cake. But there were no tears in her eyes, no shame, only a new, unfamiliar resolve. What are you standing there for? Javier barked first. Clean that up right now. See what I mean? That's her for you. I'll clean it, Maria said, and her voice was unexpectedly firm. I'll clean everything. Something in her tone stopped Javier cold. She had never spoken like this, never with that steel edge. Maria slowly straightened, locking eyes with her husband. In that moment, she saw everything with perfect clarity, every year of their marriage, every compromise, every time she stepped into the background so he could take her achievements, her ideas, her life. It all lined up in a timeline that led to this moment of undeniable truth. She hadn't been a wife, she'd been a shadow. Not a partner, but staff. Not a loved woman, but a convenient extension of his public image. And now that truth was laid bare, Maria didn't feel pain. She felt relief. As if a weight she'd carried for decades had suddenly vanished. Lucia dropped to her knees to help gather the shards. Antonio stepped forward, as if to intervene. But Maria stopped them both with a raised hand. I'll do it myself, she said, with a strength that surprised even her. From now on, I'll do everything myself. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Time seemed suspended between breaths. Maria felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her, surprised, embarrassed, afraid. She bent down, picked up the intact half of the cake stand, and placed it carefully on the table. Then, slowly, with newfound dignity, she took her glass and stood tall. The realization of her own power came as unexpectedly as the dawn after a long winter night. I'd like to make a toast, she said, and her voice, normally soft when Javier was around, now filled the room. To truth. And to new beginnings. Javier scoffed, clearly ready to turn it into a joke. But Maria didn't give him the chance. 30 years ago, I took out a loan using my grandmother's apartment as collateral. The money went toward opening our first store. Back in '93, when everyone else was losing everything, we started building. Her voice grew stronger. Carlos, do you remember the deal with El Corte Inglés? You said the contract was flawless. Rodriguez nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact. I drafted that contract. Just like I prepared the presentation for Mercadona last year. And the bank restructuring in 2008, I negotiated that too. Javier was on Tenerife then, with his business partners. Her slight pause at the end made it clear to those in the know what she was really saying. Javier's eyes narrowed. A vein bulged in his neck. Maria, what are you talking about? He hissed. You're not well. Maybe you should lie down. I'm perfectly well, Javier, Maria said calmly. For the first time in years, I feel truly well, because I'm finally telling the truth. The idea to open shops in suburban areas instead of the center? Mine. The accounting system your auditors praised, Pablo? My design. With each word, she shed another layer of weight from her past. The memories burned, but she could no longer stay silent. She didn't want to. Mendez cleared his throat and awkwardly said, "Yes, I must admit, Maria Lopez has always understood the details better than many professionals. When there were issues with the customs documentation last quarter, it was she who found the solution that saved the entire batch." Xavier's face darkened with anger, but Maria was no longer afraid. Fear is the strongest of chains, but once broken, it is impossible to return to the previous state. "Today, I turned 50, she continued, straightening even more, as if her spine had filled with steel. "And this is a wonderful age to start living for myself." She turned to Xavier, meeting his gaze directly, without fear. "I'm leaving you, Xavier." A simple sentence, 5 words, and the universe turned upside down. Consuelo gasped, pressing her palm to her mouth. Lucia discreetly clenched her fist in a victorious gesture. Xavier let out a short, almost hysterical laugh. "Are you joking?" He looked at the guests, seeking support. "She's joking, of course. A birthday, had a bit to drink." "No, I'm not joking," Maria answered calmly. "I've made my decision." Xavier suddenly stood up, knocking over his chair. "Where will you go?" His voice mixed with anger and disbelief. "You have nothing. You're nobody without me. She can stay with me for as long as she needs," Lucia said firmly, also standing up. "Of course." Xavier sneered. "Two crazy old women will live together." "Yeah, you've always turned her against me." "Xavier." Everyone turned in surprise. Gustavo's voice, usually so quiet, now sounded with unexpected strength. "Hijo mío, she's right." The old man slowly got up, leaning on the edge of the table. "You didn't appreciate what you had. I've been silent all these years, but I can't anymore. You can't treat a woman like that." Xavier stared at his father, as though he had suddenly spoken in a foreign language. "And you too? Traitor." "It's not about betrayal," Mendez said softly, breaking the awkward silence. "It's about justice. Maria Lopez has saved deals you nearly ruined with your impulsiveness. Do you remember the Alcampo story? You insisted on your terms, and Maria found a compromise that worked for everyone. And the tender last year unexpectedly added the usually silent Hernandez. We almost argued, but Maria sent a spreadsheet with calculations that put everything in order." One after another, business partners recalled moments when it was Maria, not Xavier, who demonstrated business acumen and strategic thinking. With each word, Xavier seemed to physically shrink, his broad shoulders hunched, and his confident posture disappeared. Even Consuelo fell silent, unable to find words to defend her son. Her gaze, usually harsh when it came to her daughter-in-law, now expressed confusion and something resembling shame. "Maria," Antonio's voice sounded calm and confident, drawing everyone's attention. "I've been meaning to discuss this with you. I need an experienced executive director for a new project for an eco-friendly store chain. Your experience and understanding of the market is exactly what we need." Xavier let out an indignant exclamation. You're stealing my wife?" "No," Antonio replied coldly. "I'm offering a professional position to a talented specialist with the pay and respect she deserves." Maria blinked, feeling a strange calm. The world didn't collapse. In fact, it seemed to expand, opening new horizons. Her bedroom, furnished according to Xavier's taste, classics are always in style, Maria, now seemed foreign. She methodically packed only the essentials into a small suitcase, documents, a few favorite items, photos of the children, everything else didn't matter. The phone rang. Isabel. Maria took a deep breath and answered. "Mom," her daughter's voice sounded anxious. "Dad called, said some nonsense." "What's going on?" "I'm leaving him, Isabel," Maria simply said. A long pause, just breathing on the line. "Is it because of what happened at dinner?" "No, Hija, it's because of what has happened for 30 years. More silence, then softly. "I've been waiting for you to do this." Maria froze, blouse in hand. Really? Mom, Isabel's voice quivered. I saw everything. How he treated you, how you faded with each passing year. Remember you taught me that love should make a person stronger, not weaker? Tears welled up, but Maria held them back. I remember. So, I want someone next to you who makes you stronger. At that moment, the bedroom door flew open. Xavier stood in the doorway, disheveled, with his shirt collar undone, and a bottle in his hand. Maria, you can't. He began, swaying. I can. She closed the suitcase. Sorry, Isabel, I'll call you back. Xavier stepped into the room. His face was a strange mix of rage and confusion, like a child who suddenly had his favorite toy taken away. It's all your friend, he growled. This Catalan bastard, he's been messing with your head. Maria shook her head. No, Xavier, this is my decision, and it's been brewing for a long time. You're not going anywhere. He grabbed her arm. The pain from his fingers digging into her wrist sobered her completely. Maria calmly looked at his hand, then into his eyes. Let go of me immediately. Something in her voice, a new steely note, made Xavier loosen his grip. He stepped back as though burned. Half the house is legally mine, Maria continued calmly. As well as half the business we started together. But right now, I only want freedom. We'll discuss the rest later through lawyers. She grabbed the suitcase and headed for the door. Xavier stood helpless, his hands dropped. You'll come back, he said after her, but his voice no longer had any confidence. Where will you go? In the living room, Lucia was waiting, holding Mateo tightly, who somehow had managed to sleep through the entire scandal on the couch. Antonio stood nearby, holding her coat. Everything ready? Lucia asked, and Maria nodded. Antonio helped her put on the coat, a simple gesture, but how much respect was in that motion? The car is downstairs, he said. I'll take you. Maria stopped at the doorway and looked back at the apartment where she had spent most of her adult life. Her children had grown up here, she had aged here, and here she had buried her dreams. But the strange thing was, she didn't feel sadness or regret, only lightness, a strange, almost weightless feeling. Let's go, Lucia said, taking her arm and squeezing her hand tightly. You did it, Maria. You made it. The door clicked softly behind them, just as softly as the click in Maria's mind when she finally realized that the chains that had held her all these years had existed only in her imagination. 50 years, a time when many reflect on their lives, but she was just beginning to live. Lucia's kitchen was small and cozy, wrapping them in warmth and the scent of tea. The clock showed 1:30 in the morning, but neither woman could sleep. Maria sat, cradling her cup with both hands, and looked out the window at the rare lights of the sleeping city. The reality of what had just happened was only beginning to sink in. Just like that. She murmured quietly, 30 years. And just like that, I took and left. I can't believe it. Lucia snorted, stirring honey into her cup. Just like that. Maria, you've been heading toward this for years. It just took until today for the cup to finally overflow. The phone on the table vibrated again, the 7th time in the past hour. Xavier's name lit up on the screen. Maria simply shook her head, not touching the device. He won't give up so easily, she sighed, pushing the phone aside. It was too convenient for him, the perfect wife who helps in business, keeps the house in order, and never disagrees. And, most importantly, never demands recognition for her achievements, Lucia added, pushing a rebellious red lock behind her ear. You know what always amazed me about you? Your ability to rejoice in his successes more than your own, as if your life was just an appendix to his. Maria smiled faintly. That's how it was. I got so deep into that role that I stopped distinguishing where I ended and where he began. The phone rang again. Lucia firmly took it and answered. Yes, Xavier? No, she's not going to talk right now. No, this isn't a passing whim, she paused, listening to his angry tirade. You know what, maybe for the first time in your life, you should respect your wife's wishes. Call tomorrow when you sober up." She hung up the phone and returned it to Maria. "Sorry, I couldn't take it anymore." "It's fine," Maria smiled weakly. "I probably should have learned how to say no much earlier." They talked until 4 in the morning about everything that had built up over the years, how Maria had gradually given up her own desires in favor of her husband's ambitions, how fear of change had made her endure humiliation and neglect, about unfulfilled dreams and missed opportunities. Just before dawn, curled up on the couch under an old wool blanket, Maria finally fell into a deep sleep. She dreamed she was flying over the city, above rooftops and treetops. The wind lifted her, carried her forward, and she soared, arms outstretched like wings, feeling a freedom she had never known in her life. The morning began with a ray of sunlight slipping through the loosely drawn curtains. Maria opened her eyes and, for a moment, panic surged through her, an unfamiliar room, a strange bed. But then the memories of the night before returned, along with a strange lightness, as if the invisible burden that had pressed on her shoulders for years had vanished. She carefully sat on the edge of the couch, listening inwardly, no regret, no fear, just a calm determination and a curious anticipation about what this first day of her new life might bring. In the kitchen, she found a note from Lucia. "Left for work. Back by 6. Breakfast's in the fridge. Keys on the table. You did it, Maria. P.S. Call Antonio. Don't wait." Her phone showed 12 missed calls from Javier and 1 message from Antonio. "Good morning. I hope you're okay. I'd like to talk about my offer. Call when you're ready." Maria dialed his number, surprised by her own decisiveness. "Antonio? It's Maria. About your offer, when could we meet?" They agreed to have lunch at a small restaurant at 2. Time was tight. She needed to stop by home to pick up her business suit. Javier was usually at the office at that hour, chances of running into him were slim. The familiar building, familiar scent, familiar sound of the key in the lock. But now it all felt different, foreign, obsolete. Maria quickly made her way to the bedroom, opened the closet, and took out a dark gray tailored suit, one of her few truly good outfits, bought for important negotiations. She was folding the suit into her bag when she heard the front door open. Her heart skipped a beat. Javier. He appeared in the bedroom doorway, rumpled, unshaven, red-eyed. He smelled of alcohol and cheap cigarettes, very unlike the always image-conscious Javier. "You came back," he said with a nervous smirk. "Just to get my things," Maria replied calmly, continuing to pack. "I didn't expect to find you here. Took the day off. Stress," he added with bitter irony. "Imagine that. Your wife of 30 years makes a public scene and runs off? Doesn't happen every day." Maria zipped the bag and turned to him. "It wasn't a scene, Javier. It was a decision I've been making for years." He stepped into the room, and she instinctively stepped back. She knew his emotional swings too well, how they could shift from pleading affection to cold fury in seconds. "Maria, come on, let's talk," his voice softened. "We've been together so long. You're really going to throw it all away over one stupid argument?" "I got carried away, I admit it. Had too much to drink." "Who hasn't?" "It's not about the argument," Maria said firmly. "It's about 30 years, Javier. 30 years of living your life instead of mine, of seeing my accomplishments become yours, of having my voice ignored." "Oh, come on," he threw up his hands. "I always listen to you. You know that's true." For the first time in a long while, Maria gently touched his arm. She needed to do it, otherwise she couldn't move on. Resentment is too heavy a burden. He nodded, accepting her words. "We'll always be family," Maria said, "but now in a different way, as the parents of our children, the grandparents of our grandchildren." "I'd like that," he replied, with genuine gratitude in his voice. When they returned to the rest of the guests, Maria noticed how Isabel let out a quiet sigh of relief from across the room. Something had healed, not just between Maria and Javier, but within the whole family. The grand opening of the Ecovita flagship store in the city center became a major event in the business community. A spacious interior with a bright design, live plants, and natural materials embodied the very concept of sustainability. Instead of a traditional red ribbon, there was a green one, the color of life and renewal. Antonio insisted that Maria be the one to cut the ribbon and give the opening speech. She stood before colleagues, journalists, and partners, and felt no fear, only a remarkable calm. Ecology isn't just about nature, she began once the applause faded. It's about the future, the world our children and grandchildren will inherit. Ecovita is more than a store. It's a philosophy of care, for ourselves and for the world around us. She spoke of mindful consumption, support for local producers, and paying attention to ingredients and packaging. Her words were warm and confident, and they kindled warmth in the eyes of the listeners. After the ceremony, a reception followed. Maria was mingling when she felt a gentle touch on her elbow. It was Antonio, serious, but with a spark in his eyes. "Can I steal you for a moment?" He nodded toward a quiet corner of the store, under a small archway. They stepped away from the crowd, into a cozy nook filled with handmade ceramic dishes. "You were magnificent," Antonio said. "I always knew this day would come." "How are you so sure?" Maria smiled. "I wasn't sure myself. You know," he paused, choosing his words. "I've believed in you since university. It was clear even then, you were special. Smart, determined, with inner strength." Maria felt her cheeks grow warm. A strange feeling at 50, to blush at compliments like a girl. "I remember you arguing with Professor Gomez about economic development models," he continued, smiling. "He had 3 PhDs, and you were a sophomore. But you nearly convinced him." "My God. You remember that?" She laughed, surprised. "That was 100 years ago." "I remember a lot," Antonio said warmly. "And I've always regretted not being bold enough back then, that I stepped aside for Javier." A pause settled between them, not heavy, but full of unspoken possibilities. "Now isn't the time to rush," Antonio said softly, as if reading her mind. "You have a new life, a new job. You've just found your footing. But maybe, one day, we could get to know each other again, not as classmates or colleagues, but as Antonio and Maria." She looked at his hands, strong, with long musical fingers, at the stubble on his chin, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, marks of a life well lived. "I'd like that," she said simply. "But you're right, no rush." To the birthday girl, joyful voices echoed, and glasses were raised. Maria had turned 55. In her new apartment, not rented, but owned, she was surrounded by her dearest ones, her children and their spouses, her grandchildren, Lucia and her son, Antonio, even Gustavo, Consuelo, and Javier, invited not as her husband, but as a family friend. In 5 years, much had changed. Ecovita had grown into a network of 12 stores. Maria had launched a foundation to support women in business. Javier, too, had rebuilt himself. After a personal crisis, he transformed his company into a more socially conscious business. They had learned to respect each other's boundaries and rebuild a relationship for the sake of their children and grandchildren. As for Antonio, their relationship evolved slowly, with mutual respect for the past and the scars they both carried. They didn't rush into labels or declarations, but he was there now, silver in his hair, warmth in his eyes, and an unwavering belief in her strength. "Your toast, Mom." Isabel handed her a glass. Maria stood, looking around the table at all the beloved faces, each one a reflection of a part of her life, each one a reminder of the road she had traveled. "I want to raise a toast," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "To a life that can begin at any age, if you find the courage to take that first step. To a second wind that comes when everything seems already written." She looked at Javier. He nodded, without resentment, with understanding. "To the mistakes that teach us. To the forgiveness that frees us. To the love that changes shape, but never truly leaves." And to all of you, because of you, I am who I am today. The glasses rose once more. After the toast, Maria stepped out onto the balcony. The spring breeze rustled the curtains, carrying the scent of blooming orange trees. 5-year-old Lola, Diego's daughter, slipped outside and pressed herself against her grandmother. "Abuela, what are you thinking about?" Lola asked, tilting her head up. Maria smiled, gently stroking the girl's silky hair. "About life, sweetheart. About how wonderfully strange it is." "Is it when it's sad first, and then happy?" the little girl asked seriously. "Exactly." Maria laughed, hugging her granddaughter. "Sometimes you need to be brave and say yes to life, even when you're really scared." From the balcony, the city stretched before them, ancient and forever young, just like life itself. Somewhere out there, among the streets and squares, was the bedroom with heavy curtains where she had lived for 30 years, the Ecovita office, where she had found her second wind, and thousands of lives like hers. Women standing at the edge of change, afraid to take that first step. "Take it," Maria silently told them. "At any age, it's never too late to become yourself." The balcony door opened, and Antonio stepped out with 2 glasses of champagne. "What are my beautiful girls doing out here?" he smiled. "Grandma's teaching me how to be brave," Lola announced proudly. "Oh, she's got plenty to teach." Antonio handed Maria a glass. "Your grandmother is the bravest person I know." "Braver than superheroes?" the girl asked. "Much stronger." Antonio nodded seriously. "Real courage isn't fighting monsters, it's conquering your own fears." Maria smiled, looking at them both. "Happiness is a strange thing. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. Sometimes you have to reach 50 for life to truly begin." She raised her glass, gazing out at the city glowing in the evening light. Somewhere out there, hearts were beating, people living through their own dramas, their own ups and downs, their own moments of choice. To each of them, she wished the same thing she had found: the courage to say no to imposed expectations, the strength to start over, and the happiness that comes to those who dare to be themselves. Dear friends, as we close the story of Maria, I can't help but reflect on how one firm no can change an entire life. Has this story touched you? Have you recognized yourself or someone close to you in Maria's journey? Perhaps some of you are at a crossroads right now, doubting your own strength. Remember, age is not a sentence, just a number. A second wind can come at any moment. All it takes is the courage to take the first step. If Maria's story resonated in your heart, please give this video a like. Share it with your friends, especially those who may need a reminder of their strength and their right to happiness. In the comments, tell us about your own second wind, about the moment you dared to change your life despite fear and doubt.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.